When I was an adult, I wanted to grow up and do adult things like go to adult events, learn how to drive, and get my own money. But adulthood isn't as glamorous as it seemed as a child. But at the same time, I enjoyed my childhood, especially between the awkward stage of 11 to 14. The main reason I did is because there was third spaces for people like me at the time, and there was a lot of media that I was able to consume at that age. I noticed that preteens and teens nowadays don't have as many options for themselves as much as we did in the 2000s and the 2010s. So in this video, we're going to be talking about why it has changed and the fall of preteen media and what happened to it. So make sure you subscribe and leave a like. You feel me? So obviously you guys know I'm from Canada, and if you don't know now, you know. And in my pre-pubescent years, I was in love with these three channels, and one of them is Teletoon, the other is YTV and Family Channel. Two of these channels are no longer in existence anymore, which raises the question, what do these kids have to watch nowadays? Most of this generation tends to watch Twitch and Netflix, and traditional media for them is pretty much almost obsolete. They do not have the figures to look up to as much as we did. They look up to streamers, rappers, and they look up to influencers to be inspired to or to aspire to be like. When we were growing up, we had Miley Cyrus, Raven Simone, Hilary Duff, the Jonas Brothers, Lee Thompson, Corbin Blue, Trevor Jackson. These are the stars and people that we looked up to on the movie screen and on the television screen. We wanted to be like them. In the States, they had Nickelodeon, they had Disney Channel, and they had Cartoon Network. I believe Cartoon Network is not a thing, but Nickelodeon and Disney are still operating. But there was a question that I heard on TikTok, and this is what it said. Who is the next it person? Now, the last few I've seen from Disney Channel in the last 10 years or so would be Jenna Ortega and Olivia Rodrigo. As you can see, they're running the game right now. They're doing the thing. Olivia Rodrigo with the High School Musical show and her two albums that are going crazy, and Jenna Ortega's killing it in the movie industry. And they're doing their own lane and they're doing their thing. But nowadays, you don't really see too many stars popping up from Disney or Nickelodeon, and they're not pumping out as many stars as they once did in the 2000s and the 20s. Part of the reason is that kids do not watch TV anymore. But that is the thing. So a lot of these companies are not going to put their shows on traditional TV or dedicate to having a channel because they're going to be operating at a loss, since a lot of that demographic between ages 10 to slash 11 up until 14, 15, they don't watch that stuff anymore. They're on Twitch or they're watching stuff on Netflix, so they're going to put more of their content over there. Now we're going to be talking about music. So I saw an interview with Jermaine Dupri, and if you guys don't know who that is, he's a CEO slash producer, mainly of the 90s, 2000s, and he still makes music today. But he said that there's not a lot of music on the scene for 11 to 16-year-olds. And that's a huge age group that is missing in the industry, I find. For example, in the 70s, we had the tweens then. They were listening to the Osbournes and they were listening to the Jackson 5. In the 80s, you had New Edition and New Kids on the Block. In the 90s, you had a whole bunch of different teen groups. You had Boyz II Men, you had TLC, you had Criss Cross, you had the Backstreet Boys. In the 2000s, we had Bow Wow, Lil Romeo, Omarion, we had Chris Brown, we had Miley, Demi, Jonas Brothers. And in 2010s, they even still had Ross Lynch, you had Miley's Behavior, Lil Twist, the LOL Girls. You had a lot of different acts at that time for kids talking about kid things. But what do these tweens have now? They don't really have anything, to be exact. They're listening to the same things that me, a 26-year-old, would be listening to. When I was a kid, the more mature stuff, you had to either listen to it through your older cousin or your friend's older brother, or you have to sneak and find it. But now, the kids don't have much of an option. They're listening to the same artists that somebody like me who has taxes listens to. And I don't think that's good for their development. at all. I think they skip out on a lot of moments of growing up because they're forced to mature because of the subject matter that are in this music. For example, most tweens don't have songs or anthems that they can go back to that are still childish. I could go back and spit some Bow Wow music or like sing some Omarion songs that were still good for kids at that time. But there's no in between in this generation anymore, and it's not their fault, but it's just how the system is right now. So now we're going to be talking about media and the internet. Now, social media is a big reason for this because tweens have a lot more access to the internet that we had. I remember when I was around that age, Facebook was just starting to come up. They had MySpace, but I was too young, so our equivalent would have been Club Penguin or something. But as you can see, these kids are on fully fledged Instagram, fully fledged TikTok, fully fledged Twitter. And it's to the point where they're in conversations or seeing things that they technically should be sheltered from. So they do not have an awkward stage the same way as previous generations do. And this is due to the internet because the internet gives you a lot of information. So they are able to skip the awkward stage that other generations could not avoid. This is why tweens are able to do get ready with me's, and they're doing it not in a way that a child ought to, but they're doing it in a way that a grown adult would because that's what they're seeing and they want to copy it. It's what kids do. It's basic child psychology. Or guys giving dating advice or talking about dating topics at the age of 11 and 12 when like you don't even have hair on your chest yet, but because you see older guys on Twitter or on TikTok talking about dating advice, you feel like you can do the same thing because that's what you want to copy, and it's not their fault. It's ironic how people who are not even old enough to vote would give advice to other kids, but that's just the way it is because kids are inspired by people who are older than them. I used to read a magazine of our era and it was called J14. It's basically the kids' versions of People's Magazine because they would talk about tween stars and what they're going on, who they're dating, all that type of stuff. And that was cool. My parents never bought it for me, but I had to go to the library and read it to keep up to code. Now, this makes so much sense because now you don't really have that for kids now. You want to know why? Because they're in the shade room now. They know things like why Cardi B and Nicki have beef or why Ice Spice and Lotto are beefing and stuff. We didn't really know about that back then because we only knew about what was going on with Miley and Nick, and it was tailored in a way that wasn't too invasive but alludes to an idea. They don't really have physical media that is for them as well, but that's what it is. The social media age speeds up people's processing information, and it causes us to think about things that we normally wouldn't think about, but the kid doesn't have the mental capacity, nor do they have the ability to filter out what is good versus what is bad and what they need in order to grow versus what they don't need. Their frontal lobe hasn't developed yet, so this is why the parents mainly, but also these companies need to be able to regulate better, and I believe YouTube does a decent job at doing that. Now, obviously, because this is a fashion page, we're going to be talking about fashion. They do not have the awkward stage. As you guys know, I mentioned that in the last section with social media because they are allowed to skip it. They see what older groups are doing and they get to emulate it in an effective way. Now, obviously, they do have issues with fitting in with other groups. That's always going to exist, but the room for error is a lot slimmer than what it was back then. Getting into fashion is a big idea for me, and I feel like a lot of people should. But the preteen era, in my day, we looked up to ASAP. I looked up to Kanye and ASAP for fashion. All the brands that they wore back then, I wasn't able to afford, so I had to find a cheaper alternative because it wasn't accessible, or just dream about one day I will get this item. Now, with Panda Buy and all these cheap fake sites and spreadsheets, they already know what the rappers are wearing and they just get the fake version, and it's cheaper, it's more affordable to them, And the fakes now are closer than it was back then. Because when I was a kid, you can spot fake J's from a mile away. But now the fake J's are getting passed through authentication sites like StockX with ease. So these are the issues that we're seeing today, is because they're just getting the fake stuff instead of either saving up, working, getting the right item, or finding an alternative, or just waiting till they can get it later in life. But no, they want to get it now because they want to look cool right now, which makes sense, but you're skipping processes. It's okay to be awkward for, so they obviously don't need to find their own style because there's a new core every 5 months, and they can just go on Pinterest and get their own look for that, or TikTok, and then they just go buy it on Panda Buy, and then boom, you're good to go. You don't even need to worry about finding your style yet, or curating your own interest to get to that point. They're speed running and bypassing things, and it's not good for their development. I believe that 100%, but they get to look fashionable without even putting in the work. Same goes for the girls as well. When it comes to my girlfriend Serena, she works at Sephora, and she was telling me multiple times that the Sephora girls, as they call them, they go to the store. Obviously, they want to fit in with the older crowd, so they act older than they actually are, and they're asking for like aging cream, but they're like 12. That doesn't even make any sense to me, because like you're not, that's for people who are like way later in life, like you're in your 50s and 60s and you want to look younger, but they just want to feel a part of it because it's a part of that 15-step skincare routine that they're so infatuated about. But this is the issue at hand, ladies and gentlemen. The preteen era in media, fashion, music, all these things is pretty much going obsolete, and these kids are growing up way too fast than they need to be. So, what do you guys think? Do you think this is true? Do you have any insight from yourself that you guys been seeing over the last 5 to 10 years? Let me know in the comment section down below. And with that said, your boy is out of here. Y'all live long and prosper. You feel me?